Welcome and welcome back to the channel and to my somewhat annual artist checkpoint where I assess my creative goals and everything I was able to get done in the first half of the year. It feels only natural to make a video like this in the first week of the month, especially since June 3rd happens to be my birthday. There just doesn't seem to be a more perfect time to take a step back and look at everything I was able to get done so far. Real quick though, a decent portion of this script was adapted from newsletters I posted to Patreon and Ko-fi for the first 3 months of 2026. I have since taken those down because I thought it would make more sense to have a series of end of the month retrospectives go on my YouTube channel instead, and combine that with my other series I'm trying to establish where I chat about everything I read this past month. Plus, those newsletters were kind of a cry for help. I feel like they kept falling into a pattern of, I have a lot of goals for this month. Oh no, I didn't meet those goals, but next month will be different. Oh no, again, next month will definitely be different. So, while I embark on this monologuistic rampage, I'll be inking a page from my shoujo fairy core inspired manga, 𝚖𝚘𝚎𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑. This is specifically from page 9, which is the second to last page of the comic, and the only one I can film the recording process up from scratch that didn't have any major spoilers. 2026 was a year that I specifically wanted to devote to working on my original manga projects that I plan to have featured in a self-published short story collection volume. There's so many checkpoints that I was hoping to have hit by now, yet we're in June and I haven't made much more progress than I did back in January, and it's becoming more and more obvious that the real New Year's resolutions was the friends we made along the way. It's not that I don't have a desire to work on my manga, because I definitely do. I love the process of drawing manga pages, but I've just been so slow about making progress that should not be taking me this long to complete. And being halfway through the year when I still haven't finished a single 10-page comic is incredibly disheartening. To be fair, I did have a pretty rough start to 2026, since January was taken up by me playing catch up with videos that were supposed to be done and uploaded in December, but unexpected technical problems delayed me from being able to do so. And then in February, I caught the flu, plus came down with food poisoning, so that knocked me out of commission for half of what's already the shortest month of the year. Suffice to say, this clip from Terminal Montage's Crash Bandicoot video describes my 2026 experience perfectly. I mean, on the one hand, I'm sort of grateful this year is going by as fast as it is, so all the real world nonsense can be over with sooner, but is it too much to ask for to wish my drawing progress could keep up with the same fast pace? I'm almost scared to go into detail about this kind of stuff because I know for a fact I'll have yappers regret if I do, but some days it's really easy for me to get into a groove of working on art, but other days, even the thought of turning on my laptop and picking up my stylus to draw feels as daunting as trying to climb Mount Everest. As if dealing with all of this isn't painful enough in isolation, I see my friends making so many more gains in creating art and comic pages than I am, when I know for a fact I have way less obligations and more time than they do, so I should be way further along in my own comics, but I'm just not. This comes together to make me feel terrible about myself and like I really don't care enough about my projects as much as I think I do. On top of this, I've been dealing with some physical health symptoms for a while now, which made me really worried that I had developed something serious and life-altering like diabetes or endometriosis, only for it to dawn on me that chronic and persistent stress was a more likely explanation for these symptoms, and that's kind of when things started to click for me. I've touched upon my mental health struggles in previous videos over the years, so I won't rehash those points again, but essentially I think what's going on is that I'm still carrying all this emotional weight that's been multiplying all this time, that even though I don't notice it's there anymore, it's still running in the background and affecting my functioning. Even when more positive things did happen, like making more progress in my ongoing goal to recover more files from my dead computer, this didn't make me as happy as I was expecting it to, which to me was proof that my mental health wasn't in the same place as it was back when those important files were still new to me, and how important it is for me to return to that baseline. Honestly, just acknowledging that I've been stressed and depressed for all this time has been so freeing to me. It sounds trite, but the phrase "it's okay to not be okay" is incredibly powerful and a massive help in me contextualizing why I feel like I can't accomplish everything I want to do and falling behind compared to my peers, who I'm fairly positive aren't carrying the same kind of baggage as I am. It's like we're all ice cream cones, except all of my friends are in the freezer while I'm being left outside in the sun, and I'm blaming myself for how much I'm melting over the time and wishing I could be as perfectly formed as all my other ice cream friends are. This is such a bizarre analogy, but I decided it was the best way to describe my emotions. Another big stressor of mine is that during the most vulnerable times of my life, I've been under the authority of people who made me believe my worth as a person could be proven mathematically by how productive I've been in any given week. So when I fall short of my goals, it makes it even harder for me to get back on track because I've still internalized all the things that have been said to me, and it makes me feel like a failure. So all of this made it necessary for me to stop and think about what I needed to do in order to rise above all this negativity and get my groove back, so creating the things I love can be fun instead of overwhelming and anxiety inducing. One obvious but still pretty major area for me to be more consistent in is to get regular exercise, to go outside and take a walk around the neighborhood while listening to music. My home life is actually pretty stressful, so this makes getting out of my house even more important to me, and especially now that I finally finished transferring all of my Clip Studio paint materials over to my laptop, I can go out for long walks without feeling guilty about being away from my studio. Since I have a portable drawing setup I can feel comfortable using now. Another thing I've been trying to do is implement a weekly schedule where on odd number days of the week I try to work on YouTube videos, and on even number days I work on manga. Then winding down with some media consumption such as reading a book every night and using the weekend to focus on other leisure activities. Although I would like to find a way to incorporate my manga creation into the videos I make, just so I won't burn my candle at both ends by getting really into drawing manga pages and then rushing to come up with the video idea I want to work on, because this has been happening a lot. Consistently sticking to the schedule hasn't been easy, but in the times that I've managed, it's been really helping me stay focused and make each day more purposeful, so I really want to do my best to make this work for me. I'm finding out very quickly though that because I had no social life whatsoever throughout my entire formative years, there was nothing I had to plan ahead for, which makes forming a schedule and sticking to it extremely difficult for me since I'm learning how to do this for the first time and I have no idea where to start. I'm sure these habits will stick and I'll become a planner baddie eventually, right? I'm also fighting for my life to try to get my sleep turned around since I've been dealing with insomnia for about 3 years, and being tired all the time and not having a proper sleep schedule where I'm awake during the day and resting at night definitely has an impact on my mood and productivity. But I can't rely on caffeine to keep me from falling asleep in the middle of the day because it doesn't agree with me, so I really need to find something else that'll help me stay awake until it's time to go to bed. Okay, I think that's enough doom and gloom to last a lifetime. Let's move on to the other topics I wanted to cover in this video. So last month was when I finally wrapped up my webcomic, This Is a Thing That Happened, which had been running on and off since 2020. It was a fun run, albeit fraught with setbacks and a planned hiatus, but fun nonetheless. My plan was to maintain the posting schedule I already had going and just keep all future updates for the webcomic on Patreon and Ko-fi. But right now I'm enjoying having one less time-sensitive art project on my plate, so there may be a bit of a feast or famine type of posting schedule going on. I don't regret starting this webcomic, but I have to admit after I posted that final episode, I started taking the comic down from the sites I originally hosted it on, and it felt really good to do so. Tapas doesn't have a way to unpublish or privatize a webcomic without deleting it outright, and I don't want to do that, so for now this is the only site on which the full comic is publicly accessible, which honestly makes me reluctant to promote this site alongside the other webcomic platforms I'm on, just because I don't want to be associated with this project anymore and instead be known for my manga. Speaking of manga, despite the many difficulties I've been running into, 𝚞𝚜𝚎𝚑 and Candlelight's pages are halfway done, and I'm hoping to finish and upload it before the end of the month. Of course, this is what I've been saying for the past 3 months, but I really mean it this time! Even though I've been very disappointed in myself for not having released any completed pages of 𝚞𝚜𝚎 and Candlelight, despite me having been drawing this manga since 2026 began, I guess in a way this is a blessing in disguise because I realized really early on in the stage of the process that I've been stalling on for so long that my page dimensions were wrong, so catching it at that point would have saved me a lot of headaches later on. I have been keeping track of how long it takes me to finish each step of the page making progress, and considering the last time I thumbnailed a comic page, the process took me 20 minutes compared to the average of 5 to 10 minutes for this project. I'm not sure if I'm actually getting better at putting thumbnails out faster or if I've just stopped caring, but it's still encouraging knowing I was able to lay out the structure of the entire comic all in one day, and I'm happy with how the layouts all look. Despite this quieter period for me as far as working on my manga, I was able to dedicate this time to some behind the scenes planning, including an update to the list of stories that will be included in my graphic novel print edition. Essentially, I've been getting so many new ideas for one-shot manga that one volume wouldn't be enough to contain them all, so some of the stories that were previously going to be bundled in that short story collection will be featured in another book that will be a sequel to the one I'm currently working on. I'm really happy with this new arrangement, Two of the stories I previously had slated for the first book were still really early on in the planning phase, and it was stressing me out a little to think about writing their final drafts before moving on to the artwork if I wanted to hit my goal of getting the book done before I turn 30 next year. But with these adjustments, this graphic novel will only contain stories that are further along in development, which means I can spend less time finessing the draft and more time working on the pages. On that note, I was also considering switching allegiances from Blurb to 𝚖𝚘𝚒𝚐𝚐, as far as what POD service I want to publish my books with. Not that I have any problem with Blurb that makes me want to quit using it, although I guess the royalties aren't that great. It's just that at the time I first discovered it 10 plus years ago, it appealed to me for very specific needs I had at the time, but now those needs have changed and I feel like 𝚖𝚘𝚒𝚒 is a much more versatile option. I still have my work cut out for me as far as doing research, but I'm getting excited imagining the possibilities already. In other developments, February was the month where I sent my iPad and Apple Pencil to the great beyond after 6 years of faithful service. I was hoping I could continue to find some use for my iPad even after I got my XP pen and 2-in-1 laptop, but the lack of storage and terrible battery life were making that impossible, and I had to face the grim reality that the only thing it was good for anymore was giving me some Best Buy gift cards in exchange for trading it in. The last thing I used my iPad and stylus for was to draw some fan art of Edward from Clock Tower 2 while I was still sick, so I'm glad I was able to say goodbye to it by drawing my favorite character from one of my favorite fandoms. Speaking of which, it's time for part 2 of chatting about what books I've read, movies I've seen, and games I've played this past month. The first time I did this, I covered various manga I had checked out for the first time, and for this video, the variety of media is going to be a lot more varied. So get comfy, grab a snack, and let's begin! First and foremost is an oldie but a goodie, which is the manga adaptation of 𝚖𝚘𝚎𝚑 no 𝚖𝚘𝚑. For the longest time, I've only read the first volume of the manga. I had actually known about this series for a long time prior to that, as I was really invested in collecting Figments and Dendroids at the time, and seeing new product lineups for these figure lines was my introduction to new otaku IPs. So basically I became aware of 𝚖𝚘𝚎𝚑 no 𝚖𝚘𝚑's existence because I had seen product images online of Shauna's Figma and thought she looked really cool. So naturally 13-year-old me was really excited to see the manga in the wild like that. Fast forward a decade later, I think about 3 years ago, I was at a local comic book store with my best friend and saw volumes 1 through 4 being sold together in a special aisle that sells sets of manga, and I was stoked to see this piece of my childhood again after so long. My friend bought the set for me as a gift, but in hindsight I would have left it on the shelf had I realized that the English translation of the manga was never completed. Anyway, I feel like I was such a shonen girly when I was younger. As a really little kid, I was super into Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Mega Man and T-Warrior, and even though I was really obsessed with magical girls by the time I went full-on weeb, I still found myself caught in the orbit of other series written for a teen male demographic like Hayate the Combat Butler, Kanagi Crazy Shrine Maidens, A Certain Scientific Railgun, and Toradora. All this to say, 𝚖𝚘𝚎𝚑 no 𝚖𝚘𝚑 was definitely a series I would have eaten up when I was younger, and every time I reread the first volume, I'm immediately transported back in time to when I was an awkward teenage nerd. It was a simpler time. At the same time, whenever I reread the first volume, I remember that I have a bunch of exposition to slog through. The prologue was the worst, especially since basically all the lore dumping given there was repeated later on in the story itself. It's like, get to the whale already! Other things I remember from reading volume 1 when I was younger, insert guy whose name I don't know how to pronounce, so I'm only gonna include it in the subtitles, really made an impression on me. I thought he was a fun villain, and of course I love the art style. Obviously it's not the artist of the manga and is credited as a character designer, but Noisy Ito's artwork is iconic, just quintessential late 2000s anime aesthetic at its finest. Now that I finally got beyond volume 1 for the first time, I think my attachment to 𝚖𝚘𝚎𝚑 no 𝚖𝚘𝚑 is mostly rooted in nostalgia, but I did still have fun reading it, and I'm sad that the English translation for the manga is incomplete, and the original light novel as well for that matter. I guess I'll have to go and watch the anime while praying a futile hope that the series gets licensed rescued someday. Some other parting remarks I wanted to make. 𝚖𝚘𝚎𝚑 no 𝚖𝚘𝚑 was how I first discovered melon bread, and several years after learning of its existence, I found out there's a Korean grocery store right by the comic book store my friend bought the first 4 volumes of the manga from, which happened to sell a variety of weeby Japanese snacks, including melon bread. I've had it several times over the years, and I highly recommend it. Also, the tagline for the back cover blurb reminds me of the Mew Mew Power theme song, and that makes me laugh. Speaking of manga adaptations, I was fortunate enough to stumble upon another book belonging to a series that couldn't be more different from 𝚖𝚘𝚎𝚑 no 𝚖𝚘𝚑, which is the manga version of the first Captain Underpants book. Now, truthfully, when I first heard the news that Captain Underpants was getting a manga reimagining, I thought it sounded really blurst. I mean, intellectually, it does make sense since 𝚝𝚘𝚘𝚕𝚔 has a personal connection to Japan. If I remember correctly, his wife is Japanese, but apart from that, it just kind of felt like a weird combination. But I was willing to give it a fair shake since the original Captain Underpants books were a big part of my childhood, and I really loved the movie and Netflix series, so anytime a new official release for the series gets announced is a time to be excited for me. And when I happened to see a copy at the store one evening, I knew I had to check it out right then and there. Maybe I just had my nostalgia goggles on too tight, because while I don't think this was a bad adaptation, it did feel a little strange to see this story I've read so many times be presented in the form of a comic rather than a prose fiction picture book. I feel like I can see the same thing for the art style. As someone who drew a lot of fan art for Captain Underpants when the movie came out, I have a profound level of respect for Notilde for being able to capture the essence of the characters in his style, because I know I couldn't do that. I ended up having to replicate 𝚝𝚘𝚘𝚕𝚔 style in all of my fan art, but it just feels strange seeing these characters drawn in another way when you associate them with a very particular style. It's like if you saw Wallace and Gromit in a style other than Nick Park's, you know? There's nothing wrong or bad about the new art style, but because it's different from something so recognizable, it takes some getting used to. Speaking of the art style, for some reason the way Mr. Krupp is drawn and how he emotes low-key reminds me of Jack Black, and I want to know if other people see it too, or if I'm just weird. We made a mistake casting Ed Helms and Nat Faxon as Mr. Krupp for the movie and Netflix series. It should have been Jack Black all along. I was kind of sad that they cut out the scene of the little boy telling his mom what crazy shenanigans he happens to witness George and Harold getting into, and his mom not believing him as she's reading some crazy tabloid. That's always been my favorite running gag throughout the entire series. Although the Where's Waldo segment was really cute, and the one Dr. Slump reference with Captain Underpants riding on the skateboard brought me an unmitigated amount of joy. I'm really interested to see how the other books in the series will be adapted into manga. Shortly after finding the Captain Underpants manga, I went to go see the Super Mario Galaxy movie with my friend. Right before we met up and got to the theater, I actually rewatched the first movie since it had been a while, and I forgot how much I loved it. I just want to go and play a bunch of classic Nintendo games now, especially Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, of course, since I never got to play those as a kid and was finally able to get my hands on them a few years ago, because that's what having adult money is all about! Overall, I had a lot of fun with this movie, despite me having some mixed feelings about it and thinking the first one was better, and for the rest of the day afterwards, my friend would not stop gushing about the movie, and she's not even that big into Mario, so it was just a good time for everyone. I couldn't totally avoid spoilers, so there were some character cameos I wished I didn't already know about going into this, like Pikmin and Star Fox, but I still enjoyed seeing them, even if the Star Fox integration was kind of weird in my opinion. I just think it's hilarious that even in an official Nintendo movie, Slippy Toad still ends up catching strays. The poor guy gets no respect. Also, while I am glad that Luigi was present throughout the movie compared to the first one, I still feel like he wasn't given enough of a proactive role, but I could be biased since Luigi is my favorite character and I always want to see more of him. I think Bowser's heel face turn was handled strangely as well, like the only reason he had this change of heart was so the writers could have an expedient way to get Mario and Luigi out of serving their punishment to Honey Queen, and then shortly afterwards he flipped back to being a bad guy when there's so much more potential to be had there. Back when the first teaser came out, I had an idea for a plot hook for a potential third movie, where after the events of the second movie, Bowser doesn't serve an antagonist role and is instead prioritizing being with his son Junior, which leaves the door open for Wario and Waluigi to make their introduction as the movie's villains and cause havoc, so Bowser has to begrudgingly work together with Mario and the gang in order to put a stop to their shenanigans. I'm still holding out hope that Wario and Waluigi could appear in a third movie. It just feels right, especially since the post-credits stinger has Daisy make a cameo and she and Wario both made their debut in the Super Mario Land series, so there's a connection between the two of them there. The only non-spin-off games Daisy has appeared in, Super Mario Land and Super Mario Bros. Wonder, have a well-earned reputation for being among the weirdest of the platformers, and I think capitalizing on that would be a natural stepping stone for the movies, where the first one was mostly an introduction, then the second one tried to be a more expansive and epic experience, and once the bar has been set to that level, it makes sense to go the experimental route in my opinion. Also, Also, I have a headcanon that because all the different continents of Sarasa land are based off real-life locations that have some connection to aliens and the paranormal, Daisy herself is really interested in the supernatural, and this influences her relationship with Luigi in the Luigi's Mansion continuity, where she's way more enthusiastic about his ghost hunting activity than he is, and I think it would be a lot of fun if the movie tried to incorporate that in her personality as well, especially since there are some people who say that Princess Peach stole Daisy's personality, but that's a whole other can of worms. Sticking with sequels to quirky Nintendo properties, I have been absolutely obsessed with Tomodachi Life Living the Dream. Oh my goodness. When I tell you I got hooked on this game, something awful. I know there are a lot of people out there who say Living the Dream is dramatically worse than the 3DS Tomodachi Life, but as somebody who felt let down by the marketing of the 3DS game after I got my hands on a copy, Living the Dream solved every single problem I had with the 3DS game, and I have zero complaints. Well, other than with the Robot Rally skit at the restaurant, that one's really dumb. I don't know what they were thinking when they put that in there. I was honestly worried about the Switch game cannibalizing my 3DS game, but the fact that there are so many features that are exclusive to the previous version gives me a reason to go back to it, which I really appreciate. So I think what I'll do is populate my 3DS island with less flashy Mii's, where I don't have to worry about gay erasure or their designs not being accurately represented in the vanilla Mii Maker, and watch their shenanigans unfold there. Currently, my Living the Dream residents consist of my Sona, my cat Coco, Hugh Morris, of course, the whole cast from my high school web series The Cage Underworld, the 4 Kings of Heaven from Sailor Moon, and almost everyone from the first 2 Clock Tower games, to the point where it would be easier for me to name the characters I didn't include. From the first fear, I left out Simon and Walter, and technically Dan, even though Edward is there. And from the sequel, I left out Danny, Rose, Baker, Sullivan, and Rick. When deciding on who I wanted to add as residents, I prioritized Mii's that would take advantage of the new customization features that were added to this version of the game. So I added the Clock Tower character so I could properly create a Scissorman Mii using face paint, since I couldn't do him justice on my 3DS game. And of course, having Kunzite and Zoisite plus Weltron and Kleinod was very important to me, since they could never date or get married in the previous game. Plus, with the Cage Underworld's characters specifically, I could properly accentuate their ghost features by giving them gray skin and the floats instead of walking little quirk. I intentionally didn't play the demo and waited for the full version, because from past experience, I know if I get too hyped for a game before it comes out, then once I end up buying it, I'll already be burnt out on it. But in the time leading up to release, I thought to myself, I bet it would be funny to add all the Clock Tower characters to my file and have Nolan and Tim be the first couple on my island to get married and have a child, because at the time I did ship them a little bit, but I was embarrassed to admit it. Well, guess what? As I was going down the list of creating Clock Tower Mii's, immediately after I created Tim and he got settled on the island, he fell in love at first sight with Nolan. It happened so quickly I didn't even have time to screen record it, but when it did, I was absolutely deceased. To make it even better, I mentioned this turn of events on the Clock Tower subreddit, and I accidentally got other people shipping Tim and Nolan too, which honestly just made this pairing even more endearing to me, and from that point on, I was determined to have their Mii counterparts become an endgame couple. Ultimately, I was able to hit all of the goals that appeared in my initial thought I had before the game came out. Tim and Nolan were my island's first couple, they were the first couple that went on to get married, and right now they're the only couple to have kids. I knew I specifically wanted them to have a daughter, and I went so far as to name her Julia II because my sense of humor is fundamentally broken. There are a few other Mii's that I'm considering adding to my file, specifically Hifumi Yamada and Tsumugi Shirogane, even though they're already on my 3DS save file. They're another rare pair of mine, and I already do have a fan child that I created for them, but on my previous game, I just added her in as a normal resident rather than having her be a daughter of the two of them had together, which is something I want to do differently here. And I think it would be fun if Tim and Nolan's daughter became friends with Hifumi and Tsumugi's daughter. But this isn't the only crazy story I have about Clock Tower romances on my island, not by any means, although the next one is pretty convoluted by comparison. So I completely removed Harris and Kay's dating preferences out of spite for their characters, and I guess by that same logic I could have done the same thing for Nolan, but I believe he deserves to be rescued from canon. Harris and Kay on the other hand can burn. Anyway, despite making this decision for the two of them, I have a very strong gut feeling that if I hadn't essentially made Harris a Roace, that he and Barton would become an item in no time flat, because Barton seems suspiciously eager to be Harris's friend and get close to him, almost as if he'd be flirting with him at the first available opportunity he'd be given. I mean, fake scissor men gotta stick together, I guess? Still, the mental image of Barton pegging Harris is more terrifying than any jump scare the entire Clock Tower franchise could ever throw at me, so I don't know if this ship is something I could ever warm up to like I did with 𝚘𝚎𝚜. What makes this whole situation even funnier is that right now Barton has fallen so hard for Helen that not even 𝚘𝚊𝚕𝚔 can save him, so I can't help but wonder if she's supposed to be his beard. And on top of all that, Helen only sees Barton as a friend and is in love with Hugh Morris, who barely even knows who she is and doesn't really care about her existence in general. I can't wait to see where this cursed love triangle ends up. This is beautiful. Anyway, I absolutely love this game. 10 out of 10. Last but not least, on the completely opposite end of the nostalgic video game sequel spectrum, I finally beat Clock Tower 2 100%! Unfortunately, I haven't gotten around to reading the novel adaptations yet, but I really want to. I just ran out of time before the end of April. In order to rescue Nolan from canon, I have to get myself up to speed with canon, am I right? And for anybody who may be wondering, yes, Edward is still my favorite character, although I am looking respectfully at Gotts. If there's any character who could replace Edward as my favorite, it would be Gotts. I have such a soft spot for the good-intentioned, grumpy old codger trope. He has just the right amount of irreverent snarkiness, and he's hands down the funniest character in the entire game without even trying to be. He's just the best. Tim is another favorite character of mine. I just think he's absolutely adorable. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, my least favorite character by far is Harris Chapman. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to find out that Harris and Tim were both voiced by the same actor. Once I did, it immediately had the devastating emotional impact one might imagine when you realize your Blorbo is connected to your beloathed anti-comfort character. I did eventually recover, and in a weird way, I'm kind of glad to have this information because I was in desperate need of something that could humanize Harrison just enough in my eyes so I could look at him without wanting to eat cyanide for breakfast, and learning his voice is identical to another character I happen to really like is just what the doctor ordered. For a brief pocket of time, I was playing both Clock Tower and Tomodachi Life simultaneously, which I do think was a mistake because with my island's population being the way it is, there definitely was a challenge for me to take certain scenes or characters seriously. Like, do you really expect me to care about anything Sullivan has to say when the thought of Nolan trying to form a gay polycule with Tim and Gotts is still fresh in my mind? Anyway, I quite enjoyed this game. I don't think it was as polished as the first Fear was, but I still had a good time with it. And my overwhelming urge to abandon all of my responsibilities so I can do nothing except draw fan art cannot be overstated. That being said, because I was trying to go in as blind as possible, I couldn't rely on my memory of watching previous Let's Plays to help me solve the puzzles, so getting through Chapter 3 in both Jennifer and Helen's route was pretty stressful, especially as I was trying to get all of the endings, and really especially when I had to keep the timers in mind so I could finish the game with all 7 survivors. At one point I was playing the game while hanging out with my friend, so that if I got stuck on a part I could ask her for vague hints to push me in the right direction so I wouldn't worry about accidentally spoiling myself, but instead she used this as an opportunity to frustrate me on purpose by giving me wrong answers in order to spice up my gameplay experience. Bestie, I trusted you, and this is the thanks I get? Anyway, I know I said I was trying to go in blind with this game, but I wasn't totally immune to spoilers. I remembered a very basic description of the overall plot, so I knew that Edward was actually Dan Barrows and the real Scissorman, that Harris and Barton were the fake Scissorman, and that Nolan is really creepy. So I'm looking forward to going through my backlog of horror games that I know nothing about, so I can have a fresh experience with these scares instead of just waiting to see certain scenes in their original context. I'm realizing a little too late just how cathartic playing creepy games can be. It's like eating spicy food, which I also really love. This kind of contradicts what I just said about playing horror games that I know nothing about, but I think next I want to check out Dino Shokotaku and Enemy Zero, even though I've already read quite a bit about them beforehand, just because both Enemy Zero and Clock Tower 2 celebrate their 30th anniversary on the exact same day this year. Plus D has been on my backlog for long enough as it is, so it's about time that I go ahead and play it. Before I wrap up this part of the video, I want to ask the rest of the fandom, if Clock Tower 2 got a hypothetical remake or remaster, how you would prefer to see the cinematic cutscenes for the endings and the evil murderer lives a track screen be done over? Would you like to see them remain in CG with higher fidelity graphics, or to be 2D animated in Mario Kart Race style? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And with that covers everything I wanted to talk about in this 2026 mid-year review. Sorry that it got kind of heavy at the start, but I've just been going through it lately, so pray for me that my future monthly retrospectives can be a little more upbeat. I hope you enjoyed listening to my voice, or otherwise watching the process of me inking this manga page. And now the time has come for me to shut this video down. Make sure to give both bouquets and pats, snacks, and playtime before you log out, and head to the description of this video to find links for every other corner of cyberspace I'm on. Funding for this channel was provided by my Patreon and Ko-fi members. If you enjoy my creations and want to see more from me, then consider joining for as low as $1 a month. Thanks for letting me chat with you, and until next time, can we please have a year in this decade where everything is not burning to the ground for 5 minutes?